Well, welcome and thanks so much for joining us, especially since this isn't one of our regularly scheduled Art of Feminine Negotiation podcasts. Today is a special episode, a special discussion. We're going to have the chance to talk with Dr. Daisy Khan about a very timely issue, and I could not resist the opportunity. So welcome, Daisy. It is so great to have you here.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and for those, if you're wondering, oh, what is this special episode about? We're talking today about the art of negotiation and specifically navigating the choice between Kamala and Trump through dialogue, persuasion, and compromise. And for those of you who don't know Dr. Khan, she's received numerous well-deserved awards, including Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, Huffington Post Top 10 Women Faith Leaders, Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award, and many, many more. She's considered an expert on building interfaith bridges, building peace, and building equality and human dignity. So let's jump in, Daisy. The U.S., polarization is clearly at an all-time high. Some fear we're on the brink of civil war. Let's start that. What are your thoughts about this polarization? What's happening? What can we do about that?
Yeah, I think that most of it is based out of fear of the other, fear of the unknown. And the fear has been precipitated and has seeped into the consciousness of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fear is completely irrational because people don't even know why they are fearing the other side. So in the case of Muslims, for instance, there's an irrational fear of Muslims that somehow Muslims are going to take over this country, even though we only represent 1% of the population.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to take over the entire country, but that's what these people are told. They are told that. And so, and then immigrants are going to take over, even though, the foundation of immigrant is founded on immigrants coming, enriching lives, enriching the culture. And the success story of America is all about,
Absolutely.
continued immigration. Yes, we don't want illegal immigrants. Yes, we do want to curtail that. But then to speak about immigrants in such a way only just breeds the fear of all immigrants, and people lash out. So my fear is that people are not speaking to one another.
Yeah.
They're not exposed to the other. And that division that has been artificially created is like become a chasm now.
Yeah.
Chasm. How do we create, how do we heal this chasm? So
well, and I love that you use the word artificial, because I feel like this fear is being fostered. It is actively being manufactured. If Karl Marx were still alive, he'd probably be saying that fear is the new opiate of the people, right?
Exactly. Opiate of the masses. Yeah.
Keep people in a state of constant fear. We've certainly seen that post 9/11, and social media doesn't help. We have this echo chamber that just keeps reinforcing confirmation bias, where people are only seeing and hearing and taking in views that they already hold. And we're really seeing now, I guess, with the US election campaign in full swing, and hence the purpose for this sort of special episode. What impact do you see on this division with the US election campaigns in full swing?
Well, I think that what's happened is that with the Harris ticket, it's like all of a sudden, out of left field, something new got injected into this election. Like a curveball that no one really expected. Everything was moving, the status quo, the chasm was all set. The ads were all done, and there you have this curveball coming out of nowhere and upsetting the entire barrel. And now it's a question of what's going to prevail. I mean, America could take two completely different directions.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And they are so stark. But they have so much impact. And not only on America, but worldwide, because we still are the most powerful nation on the face of this earth. And whatever America does get replicated in other countries eventually. And people do look at America for leadership, and especially cultural shifts. Remember when Obama became president, people around the world were so impressed, like, oh my God, you Americans really surprise us all the time. Here you have surprise, surprise, surprise. So you have not the potential of the first woman president, not just a plain old white woman.
Yeah.
You have a woman who's completely unexpected.
I
The
love
makeup
that.
is completely unexpected.
Well, let's dig into that for a moment, James. Like, because I think, the choice, as you've alluded to, the choice facing Americans right now is critical, right? It's going to
Yeah.
determine not only the future of the country, but possibly the world. And I'd love, like, what tips do you have for navigating that choice between the Harris camp and the Trump camp, right? In
Yeah.
constructive ways.
Yeah. So I think that people have to stop looking at this ideologically and start looking at this literally like a checklist.
Yeah.
Like, let me just check off all the things that I get with this candidate and all the things that I get with this candidate.
I
And
like that.
whichever candidate gives me the most things is the candidate I'm going to go with, because that's not only going to be good for me, that's also going to be good for the country. So you have to think of the welfare of everyone,
Yeah.
not just your
Yeah.
personal welfare. So I think what's happened is we've all gotten so ideologically driven
Yeah.
that we see everything in terms of Democrat and Republican.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you kidding me? There's an
Yeah.
entire middle ground here.
Yeah.
That there is an entire center here that does not know how to think.
Yeah.
So I want people to start thinking about negotiating in their own mind who is the ideal candidate for
Yeah.
them, rather than just ticking off the Democrat ticket, and then 2 years later you discover that they're not really doing
Yes.
much for you, right?
I love that. And I'm going to want you to go through some of the, if you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear some of yours. But before we do, talk to us a bit about the role of dialogue, right? And it's one of the reasons I felt so strongly about having this special episode. Just let's start. And I knew you're somebody who advocates about building those bridges and about finding ways to find that peace. And my goodness, we need that healing, certainly right now in the United States. So
Mhm.
talk to us a bit about the role of dialogue and the role of persuasion, right? What does that mean? How can we do it more effectively?
Yeah, so dialogue is going to be super important for the next couple of years, because whoever wins, half the country is going to be unhappy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We already know that.
Yeah.
And so then how do you build an entire nation with one set of a population feeling
Yeah.
so alienated and feeling so demoralized
Yeah.
that the other, so we have to reach out to the other side, and we have to start having conversations. I mean, and these conversations don't have to be like a town hall. These
Yeah.
conversations can be within small circles of people,
Yeah.
where you are now reaching out to the opposite side, or who you
Yeah.
think is in opposition to you, and start having constructive conversations about what
Yeah.
do you really want, because you will be surprised when you listen to the other. I always find that when I listen to a completely different point of view, I get fascinated that they
Yeah.
even think like that. I'm
Yes.
like, how can they even think like that? But because I'm curious by nature, then my own opinion gets better informed and more nuanced.
Yeah.
And I'm able to form a better opinion, because now my opinion has already taken into consideration, what the other side is thinking. So for
Yeah.
instance, in the case of Israel and Palestine, which is a very hot subject
Yeah.
since October 7th, is because I had to go into the workplace because people couldn't communicate with one
Yeah.
another. Like, coworkers couldn't
Yeah.
talk about something that was so sensitive. So how do you broach this subject? How do you speak about it?
Yeah.
Then all you have to do is speak to the people and say, what is it that's hurting you? And do some active listening. Active
Yes.
listening means not passing judgment, right?
Yeah.
Not passing judgment, not interjecting, not giving your point of view, just listening. I know it's really hard because Americans by nature are a very talkative, fun people. But really, if we just listen to the other and let the other person speak their point of view, and you
Yes.
just take that in, you don't even have to respond to it. And
I
you just
love it.
understand what the other one is saying. Your own thinking gets transformed over time,
Yeah.
and you begin to have an appreciation for what the other side is thinking and
Yeah.
what their concern is.
Yeah.
And so then somewhere along the way, there's a little bit room to maneuver and navigate each
Yeah.
other, and then come to some middle point where you can come to an agreement on something.
Oh,
So it's an art, but it's not impossible. It's
yeah.
just we've forgotten how to do it because
Yeah.
social media has taken over.
Yeah.
So our information bias kicks in,
Yeah.
our own thinking gets reinforced, and we don't, like, for instance, I'm in this, this is my work. My work is to build bridges. So I
Yeah.
listen to everybody. So,
Yeah.
when the Republican convention is going on, I listen to each and every speech. because I wanted to see what they were saying.
Yeah.
And some things I completely agreed with. And I was like, oh yeah, that's great. And then some things I was like cringing and I'm like, what? How can you say that? But then I was looking at the greater good. Okay, if they're going to be my leaders for the next 4 years, what am I going to be confronted with?
Yeah.
You see, some of it you have to do because you have to prepare yourself for the opposition too.
Yeah.
If
Now,
you don't know what the other side is saying, how are you going to survive during that?
Yeah. So eloquent, so beautifully put. And I want for our listeners, I want to put a pin in a couple of things that Dr. Khan was just saying there. And two words in particular that you use that I want to circle back to. One is curiosity and fascination. And, and in my book, I talk about this, I call it the art of fascination and the art of curiosity. It is a game changer. So you beautifully weave that in, showing up as these, sort of empty containers, as you and I were talking about before we just got on air here, to be open to receiving other perspectives. It doesn't mean that you're having to concede necessarily your point. It's being open to the possibility.
You don't have to suspend your own judgment at all.
Yeah.
You can hold on to your view because you think that your view is superior because your view is informed by something greater that is a better good, right? So, for instance, if we just look at, the fear that brown people are going to take over all of America, right? That is the fear that white people have or white nationalists have. And that's the fear that is really motivating them to vote for a particular candidate. But is that fear rational?
Yeah.
So what does it mean if America gets a little browner? Does that mean we become less American?
Yeah.
Hasn't America always been changing and shifting and evolving? And we've always still remain American? Haven't immigrants and people of color enriched this nation?
Yeah.
And so why are we looking at the negative aspect of that and not the positive aspect of it? So all you have to do is change how you view that. From which lens you're viewing it, and you'll see a completely different picture.
Yeah. And the only way you can shift your lens is by being open to hearing other perspectives. Surrender ego for a moment. Actively seek out, because it's funny, you mentioned social media as well. And as you said it struck me that we're losing the human connection to be able to have those meaningful dialogues when we communicate that way. So being open to those and actively seeking out views that differ from yours as a way to grow and to learn and to expand your own perspective about it. I think that's beautiful. And I'd love to know if you could circle back and talk to us a bit about, you were saying about making those checklists. What are some of the things that you would be encouraging people, as they face this upcoming very important choice between these two divergent camps? What are some of the things you'd encourage them to be looking at?
I would say that if we have to look at America, I mean, once again, we should not be looking at this election from simply a personal point of view. We should be looking at, a national, because we know that our nation is going through some tough moments, and this moment presents a different opportunity. To not take back the country, but to retain the good that we have in America, right?
Nice.
So one of the things that I'm an immigrant to this country, and one of the things I love about this country is that we have a justice system and a law and order. We value law and order, and we also value our justice system, right? I mean, every country that goes down the drain, there's no justice system. And so you have to respect the justice system. And so this one candidate, the woman candidate, is a prosecutor. She prosecutes criminals. And the other candidate will probably pardon some people that had done some criminal or had been, accused of something. So you have to look at that. So what does that mean to have a person in a leadership role that devalues law and order and devalues prosecuting criminals? So that is very important for all of us, for all of America. It's not just.
And I just want to stop and pause for our listeners to give you credit that's due how gracefully you handled that. I mean, I laughed out loud, as you saw, because I thought for sure you were going to say one prosecutes criminals, one is a criminal, and you did not go there. You took the high road, and I bow down to you for that, Dr. Khan.
Well, again, I don't like bashing people.
Yeah, that was beautifully handled.
Because human beings are human beings, and if we are speaking to all Americans, I think that we have to respect people at their core. And so how you communicate with people is also important, because you can turn people off.
Yeah. Well, and I'm laughing about it, but it's a really valid, important, critical point about if we're going to be talking about how do we persuade people to possibly different views, using language that you know is going to be triggering, using language
Right.
that you know is going to antagonize, is never going to allow you to be received in the way that you want to be received. So,
Right.
sorry, carry on.
So the second one for me is the environment. And again, this is not, you just have to wake up every day and see what's going on.
Yeah.
You could be in the middle of July and have a flood
Oh,
or have snow. And,
yeah.
we all know that climate is changing.
Yeah.
And I'm a person of faith. And I am taught in my scripture that I have to safeguard and be a steward of the environment. I am not to take the environment for granted because it's not for me in my
Yeah.
generation, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
And I have to leave it in a good condition for the next generation.
Yeah.
So one candidate is going to preserve the environment or work towards
Yeah.
preserving the environment. Another candidate actually denies anything is happening. So we have to understand what is at stake. So
Yeah.
again, this is not only for America, this is for the entire universe.
Absolutely.
This is for our existence, period, right? Everybody says that, we are in an existential threat.
Yeah.
So the environment. Third, one candidate is almost colorblind, is like so mixed up in their
Yeah.
in their heritage, in their
Colorblind. I love
coloring,
that.
that they're almost colorblind, and they're going to be colorblind.
Yeah.
The woman president or the woman candidate is going to
Yeah.
be colorblind because she herself is a mixed color
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
and the other person only sees whites as being
Yeah.
superior.
Yeah.
So do we want a country where racism becomes the norm? No.
Yeah.
America should not be a nation because America is a nation of many ethnicities
Yeah.
and, a variety of people.
Yeah.
Then one person is always smiling
Yeah.
and joyful. I know that people think that women shouldn't smile all the time. This is one of those things that women leaders, they always nitpick on women leaders.
Yes.
She's always, projecting a joyful, happy persona. The other person almost looks like depressed all the time or angry all the time.
Perma scowl. Yeah.
Yeah, a scowl. So do we want to have happiness? Do we want our leader to smile? Prophet Muhammad said, when you can't give any charity, smile is charity.
I love that.
Smile
And
and
just before you go on, I want to comment because I think you've also touched on something really important, not just for the election, but on the bigger sort of world stage about gender issues right now and how we judge them while we're in this period of sort of transition. For so long, we've defined success based on a very sort of one track, more so-called masculine sort of competitive model. And women have been conditioned to believe that the only way to succeed is to step into that, to suppress those sort of so-called feminine traits,
Right.
to speak differently, to speak, literally change your voice so that you're speaking in a lower register, to be able to show up in the boardroom differently. And I love that you said that about the smile. I think COVID shifted that a bit. And my hope for the world is that we start to see that so-called feminine traits are not, in fact, a weakness or a liability, but are the wave of the future, are a new leadership paradigm, whether for men or women, crossing gender, that both men and women stop seeing empathy and collaboration and curiosity and fascination and all of those traits, stop seeing them as a liability. So sorry, I just wanted to comment that really struck a chord with me when you said that about her smile and that she gets criticized for it.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing that's really important to all Americans, and I think that majority of women would agree with this, is that we really don't want government interfering in how women, what women do with their bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not just talking about Roe versus Wade because I think that once people run with one thing and they weaponize religion and religion gets weaponized against one group, it can easily get weaponized more and more because once people are successful and they know how to do this weaponization, I'm speaking from experience. Somebody who has experienced the weaponization of religion against my people and women in particular in Afghanistan. So I'm like, what's the difference? We just weaponized religion in Afghanistan, and now we weaponized it against an entire, segment of society here. So I'm not pro-abortion. I'm not pro anything, anti anything. I'm just saying that this choice needs to be left with women and her doctor. Because this is a decision that should be made in the privacy of the home of the couple. The couple gets to make this decision on what they do with their lives and how they build a family. And then if there's a health issue, the doctor gets involved in this. The government has no place in this. And so I think that she would safeguard that. That's super important. And it's important not only this. And so these are just some of the things. Then, of course, immigration. I know that there's a lot of talk about immigration, and she herself is first generation. Her mother was an immigrant to this country. Her father was an immigrant to this country. And so I think that she has learned some things from some of the pitfalls of what happened in the borders. And so she's got some experience on how to deal with this. But I think that she would understand what legal immigration is and how to fix the illegal immigration problem that we have. And so I think we would have a better and well-informed person rather than somebody who always blames immigrants for everything. Right? When you say that immigrants are rapists and they're Mexicans, and you're basically just doing the same thing that you would do with everybody. You're lumping everybody together in one group. So I think that these are just 5 big reasons that are on the consciousness of most Americans, that I think that if we look at those, and of course there are so many others, it would be great to have a first female president.
Yeah.
The United States.
Well, and I must say, Daisy, how you framed these as well. Like, this is a thoughtful process of questioning fundamental principles in a way that allows for the opening of dialogue in respectful ways, allows for the possibility of, persuasion, allows for the possibility of compromise, which we need, and avoiding, I mean, the other thing you've sort of alluded to as well is, do we want a leader who fosters fear, or do we want a leader who helps us to overcome those fears to get more productive outcomes? I think just being beautiful. So, and I want to speak to one thing. You talked about active listening as well. And I want to really put a pin in that for our listeners as well, is as we invite you to start having some of these discussions, to be having some of these dialogues, moving through these election campaigns and moving to the actual election itself. When you're listening, we hear a lot of talk about active listening being like, don't be just waiting for your turn and reflect back what's heard. And I like to encourage people, I call it elevated active listening, where when you are reflecting back what you're hearing somebody say, it's a great, and I challenge you to do this in your conversations, elevate their position and put their argument or position forward in a way that's even more graceful and gracious and compelling than they did. I've got to tell you, it is a game changer in really on divisive issues. And certainly in my career as an attorney, once I got past that, take no prisoners approach and had my epiphany about leaning into the so-called feminine traits, you can take somebody who is so fanatical about their position, and when you put their argument back to them in ways that is more compelling than they did, it invariably stops them in their track and triggers reciprocity. They suddenly become more open to at least listening to your position. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Daisy.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, because everybody wants to be heard. And everybody wants to be listened to. The problem is we're talking past one another. We're not listening to one another. If you just let the other person speak. I remember I walked in, I was invited to a prison once by an attorney. They wanted me to speak to one girl who had joined an extremist group. And, she was very, she was a tough girl. And I walked in there and I told her, I said, I'm here to help you. I mean, I've been told that I should come and help you. And so I don't know how I can help you, but I'm here to listen to you. So tell me where you were born. Tell me what your childhood was like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then tell me why you wound up here. And I said, and you have an hour. You just keep talking. And as she was talking, because I was like the therapist, right? I was like the therapist. And so much stuff came out of that conversation, because she told me all the trauma that she had suffered, how at 11 her mother had gotten blinded, and how from 11 to 14 she was taking care of a blind mother. She couldn't go to school during that time. I mean, all kinds of stuff that came out. And then when her mother died, how she was taken by social services, and how she was moved from one foster care to another, and how she got peanut butter and jelly, even though they got $7,000 to take care of her. She's like, oh, do I need to tell you more? I could write a book on this topic. So I think what happens is that people just want to be heard and listened to and validated. And that's what you're doing when you're doing active listening. You're saying, talk to me. Like, like a good therapist would. So you don't have to be a therapist. You just have to let people speak. Because if people know that you're really listening, they will share a lot of things with you that they wouldn't have shared with you if you're passing judgment.
Yeah. And interestingly, I think people are afraid that if they do that, that they're somehow going to be giving up on their beliefs and values. And in my experience, the opposite is true. It's when you deeply listen to the other person that you actually find what motivates them. And then it opens the door for you to actually be more persuasive when you share your views, and vice versa. It allows you to be open to possibilities that might be better than what you believe. So Daisy, you've given us a great template here today to be able to at least kickstart this process and dialogue in a respectful way. I love how you've laid it out for our listeners. I hope you really paid attention as well. You can start adding to the list about your pros and cons about the things you're looking for and be having those discussions. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing here today.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for having me. And thank you to the listeners for listening in.
Yes, and you've given us so much to think about here. And I just want to end by saying for our listeners as well, like really open yourself up. I invite you, I challenge you to open yourself up to new perspectives and growth. You know, in today's global world, it's interesting because in so many ways we're more connected than ever before. And yet, despite that apparent interconnectivity, we often find ourselves so entrenched in our own beliefs, seeking out only information that confirms what we already think we know, that, you know, the essence of confirmation bias. And that is such a powerful and dangerous force that can shape our perceptions. And we're seeing this bias play out on the stage, you know, on the world stage today. So, and I would ask you, if you're being ruthlessly honest with yourself right now, I would wager that every listener out there is guilty of acting out based on our own confirmation biases. And I'll be the first to put my hand up. I know I have, I know I do, and I try and catch myself every day. So question your assumptions, seek out diverse opinions and perspectives, embrace uncertainty, embrace the possibility that the perspectives you've been holding on to so dearly might be wrong, might not be the best for you or the country. Make smart decisions.
Yeah.
And that is a wrap for this episode. And Daisy, first, let people know where they can find out about you, because I'm sure you've piqued a lot of people's interest. If they want to reach out, where should they do that?
Yeah, so they can reach me through my website, daisycon.com. That's KHAN, H before the A. And then they can send me an email, info@daisycon.com. I do receive those in emails directly. And they can purchase the book on Amazon, 30 Rights of Muslim Women. And, you know, I'm happy to get involved in anything that people want to get involved in. I make myself available to people if they need me for anything. Yeah.
I love that. And
we have to do this work together. We have to do this work together.
Absolutely. And you are so generous with it. And I wish we had more time. I encourage our listeners, look up Daisy, see some of the incredible work that she's done. My goodness, her and a group of women she put together went to Afghanistan, you know, after the Americans left, and tried to negotiate on issues of education for Afghan women. I mean, she has just done some remarkable work building bridges. I encourage you to check her out. And again, that is a wrap for this episode. Until next time, as always, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve, from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care. Be sure to share this episode with other people in your life so we can kickstart a movement to have the kind of dialogue we need to be making smart decisions in this upcoming election. Take care.
Thank you.